Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. Well, work this out. So, Junior Foreign Office Minister Rory Stewart made it very clear yesterday, and we touched on it on the show, that British ISIS fighters should be killed in Syria rather than be allowed to return to the United Kingdom. He says that they're guilty of horrific acts, and the only way of dealing with them is to kill them in almost every case. Wow, I thought. That's pretty strong stuff. And this morning, Richard Littlejohn in the Daily Mail saying, at last, a politician who says what we think. And Littlejohn in this column, in no uncertain terms, saying drone strikes, whatever it takes, take these people out. And the Defence Secretary, Michael Fallon, was questioned again today on this and said, look, these people have made their decision. So backing up firmly what Rory Stewart had said. And this is also very much the position of the Americans too. So the British government says if you are a UK passport holder and you're in Syria fighting for ISIS, we are going to kill you. And then this morning, a report was released by the Soufan Group, a part of the Global Strategy Network, saying that at least 5,600 jihadis from 33 different countries had already returned home. And guess which country has the highest percentage of returning jihadi fighters? Any guesses? Yeah, it's the same country with a government who says if you're a British passport holder in Syria, we'll kill you. But if you come back to the United Kingdom, oh, that's marvellous. We haven't got any trouble with that at all. I tried my utmost to make this an issue in the general election of 2015. I put out the argument that none of these people should be allowed back home. Their passports should be taken away. And I did get the government to toughen up its rhetoric. But can I tell you, of the over 400 jihadis that have returned so far, do you know how many this government and our Home Secretaries, including Theresa May, do you know how many they've stopped? One. And the rest are back here. And to my total astonishment, Max Hill QC, who is a government advisor on terrorism legislation, has said in the last few days that people who come back from Syria shouldn't be prosecuted. Most of them only went to Syria because they're naive, and they should be reintegrated into society. So government policy is this. We want to make Syria as safe as possible, whilst at the same time endangering the lives of innocent people at home. That is government policy, and I think it's absolutely stone bonkers. So I want to know what you think. Do you think Rory Stewart is right, that they should be taken out and killed? Do you think the policy of the British government with returning jihadis is right, that they should be let back onto the streets, reintegrated in society because they're naive? Or perhaps you think they're both wrong. I don't know. But whatever view you've got on this war, which British people have taken part in, please let me know what you think by calling 0345 60 60 973. You can, of course, text to 84850. You can tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. You can watch the show live on Facebook and comment there too. David from Norwich. Help me, David. How can the British government have two seemingly diametrically opposing views? And David, one quick point. With the fall of Raqqa and with ISIS militarily having a very, very hard time, it could be that the flood of returning jihadis gets a lot quicker. David, good evening.
Good evening, boss. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay, but I can't believe that our government wants to make Syria safer and here more dangerous.
I think these independent reviews, they can run by complete madmen on illegal and political lunatics.
Oh, but this chap is a Queen's Counsel. It's Max Hill QC. I mean, this is an esteemed member of the liberal elite. David, what are you saying?
The thing is, I mean, Andrew Parker even said that's the head of MI5, said 2 or 3 months ago, look, there are, at the moment, in his honest opinion, the bare minimum of 23,000 jihadists in this country. At the moment, few of them are actually up front doing what they shouldn't be doing, but the vast majority are sleepers. They're sitting there waiting. Now, these guys that have been out there now, they're not going to come back and land at Stansted and get off and hand their passports in. They're going to come back in through the back door. That's how they're going to get here. But how are we supposed to know how many kids they've murdered, how many people they've beheaded, how many women they've raped, or kids they burnt or boiled in buckets of water or thrown off roofs. You're never going to know that. And all they're going to do is get back over here and back up the people that are already here. It's complete
one of the reasons,
madness, Nigel.
David, one of the reasons I came out with this policy in 2015 was that it seemed to me that having been out in a war zone fighting with ISIS, they would have been more brutalised and dehumanised than they were when they went in the first place. And they do now pose a genuine threat on Britain's streets. It's just as simple as that, isn't it?
Well, absolutely. The intelligence service and the police can't handle what they go. Back in the day, I mentioned this earlier on. Back in the day when the IRA we had trouble with them, the British police and the military, we knew where sort of 99% of them were and looked after their numbers and dealt with it. Now, because of the massive numbers that are here, the security service, we can't deal with it. And these guys that are coming over now with lots and lots of active service experience behind them, they're going to make it 100 times worse. And we're going to.
I think I'm right, David, in saying that towards the end of the Northern Irish conflict, in terms of the number of IRA people that we were concerned about, the number was about 600. There were about 600 people that we were genuinely worried were capable of terrorist outrages. As far as the numbers here, well, it's 3,000 suspected terrorists, 500 under round-the-clock surveillance, and another 20,000 linked in some way. But, of course, if you think back to the horrors of London Bridge and Borough Market, a couple of those guys weren't even known to the police and to the security services. So the real figure, David, I don't really want to try and scare people, but the real figure is actually likely to be significantly higher than 23,000.
But it is, Nigel. You're dead right. Substantially more. That's why the head Andrew Parker, head of MI5, said, in his honest opinion, and it was obviously a low figure. But if you match that and accept that figure as correct, and then look at what the British government aren't doing at looking after their borders. So apparently, on a daily basis, we're only checking, or the border agency are only checking 7% of everything coming into this country. That's lorries, containers, buses, coaches, either physically or electronically. So that's 93% of everything coming to this country is not checked.
Not checked.
So how many? Okay, we get the odd lorry load jumping off on the M1, illegal migrants.
Sure.
How many of that lorries, etc., have got AK?
None of us know. None of us know. None of us know. David, very quickly, yes or no answer. Morally, is it right for the government using drones to target UK passport holders fighting for ISIS in Syria?
Yes.
OK, thank you very much indeed, David, with a very clear view there. Couldn't be clearer. Michael is my next caller from Bournemouth and a new caller to the show. Michael, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel.
So, help me. Which part of the government is right? The one that wants to kill them all, or the one that thinks they've been naive and should be reintegrated?
I don't think they're naive. I feel that they were quite prepared to kill the rest of us if they had the chance. If they're fighting for ISIS, and they have given up their citizenship.
That's my view. So, help me as to why Theresa May as Home Secretary, and then subsequently Amber Rudd as Home Secretary, have only stopped one of them from returning.
Well, it seems that they are not very competent. There is a problem there.
Is it competence or is it will?
Possibly both.
Possibly both. Right, so what would you do, Michael? You're in charge now, Michael. You're the next Home Secretary. What would you do?
I would stop them at the border, send them back to Syria.
Fine. Simple as, no questions asked. Would you remove their passports from them too?
I would.
You would?
Yes.
Michael, couldn't be clearer. Another very, very clear message there from Michael. John says on Facebook, so you can track people online for saying things but not returning British jihadis. Well, John, bit tough to argue with that point, isn't it? Luke says, yes, they should be killed if in action. And that's, Luke, a question about rules of engagement, because there could be British citizens in Syria for a host of other reasons. They could be visiting family. Indeed, they could even be fighting for the other side, a point that we may touch on in a few moments' time. Martin is calling me from Forest Gate. Martin, have I got this wrong, or is government policy here totally inconsistent?
Totally inconsistent. They are absolutely bonkers. If we know who the people are leaving this country and are being trained by ISIS to kill people in the world, they should have everything that's given to them. And they say, as you've said, it sends drones over there to kill these terrorists that are absolute monsters, and they should not be allowed back in the UK whatsoever. Once they're there, they've gone in their own accord. and I think you've got to also blame the families for letting them go, partly anyway.
Well,
they should not be allowed to go.
Well, you say that.
Outside the country.
You say that, Martin, but it is possible, is it not, that a teenager in their bedroom looking at stuff online sees some sort of, for whatever reason, I mean, it's not just men that have gone, young women have gone to become ISIS brides. I mean, it beggars belief why a woman would leave London or any of our big cities and go and do that. So some of them, Martin, may have been brainwashed, and it's not always possible for parents to be totally in control. But having said that, is it possible, Martin, that some of them were naive?
It's a difficult question to answer because you just don't know in their situation why they've gone out there. But if they've taken it on their own accord, they've left the country, they're fighting the world, they are, blowing people up, they're killing people.
So you've got no moral qualms, Martin, about drones being used to take out individuals or groups of individuals.
Absolutely.
Fine. Martin, thank you very much indeed. Another new caller to the show. Martin, Anne says on Twitter, I think the government's independent review of terrorism is naive. I think that's a very good one. This is a no-brainer. Anyone with known terrorist links should be eradicated. Too much risk to take otherwise, says Ollie. Ollie, anyone with known... there are up to 23,000 people in this country with known terrorist links. We have to deal with it, but I'm not sure eradication is an option. I'm not even sure that internment is an option. And there are some quite senior figures who said there should be thousands of these people rounded up and put in prison. And my fear with that, and I'm not a softie, but my fear with that has always been that if you did that, you possibly will alienate huge numbers of moderate, law-abiding Muslim people living, working, bringing up their families in this country. That's always been my fear. Right now, you're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, and it's 7:15. So government policy, it's perfectly clear. If you're a British fighter for ISIS in Syria, we are going to do our best to kill you. But if you want to come back home, that's great. You can just walk the streets freely because only one of the over 400 returning jihadis has been stopped from coming back in. And all of this on the day when we get the news that a British man who had travelled to Syria to fight against Islamic State has died while clearing landmines in the former ISIS-held city of Raqqa. Sniper Jack Holmes, 24, from Bournemouth, had fought alongside the Kurdistan People's Protection Units, YPG, and been out there since January 2015. His mother last spoke to him at the weekend, and he was saying how he hoped to be home for Christmas. He's fought in many battles and been surrounded by ISIS fighters at times, she said, of her only child. So there's somebody that's out there fighting, but fighting against ISIS. I don't know how many Brits are out there fighting against ISIS, but there are quite a few. And I would guess we would take a very different view as to the actions of Jack Holmes than we would for those who are fighting ISIS. Surely, if ISIS is the mortal declared enemy of this country, anyone that goes to fight for it is committing an act of treason. I would have thought it's just as simple as that. I wonder what Mattios from Waterloo thinks. Good evening, Mattios.
Hi, good evening.
So what do you think, Mattios?
Well, I think that there is a necessity of attempting reintegration into society because there are varying reasons why they could join in the first place. Mm-hmm. However, there is a limit of how it could threaten national security for the UK.
Well, clearly it could, couldn't it? I mean, if these people have been brutalised, and it only takes a handful of them to have come back from Syria and to still hold the same views, and now to be trained in weapons use, to be trained in bomb making. Mm-hmm. Surely, in many ways, they are the most dangerous people we've ever had in the country.
But then why usually do they come back in the first place?
Well, there are lots of reasons for that. One or two may well have said, don't like this, I've changed my mind. Some may think, gosh, I'm going to finish up being killed. But others, I suspect, are coming back now because ISIS is beaten. Raqqa, well, not beaten, but it's been losing battles. It's lost the city of Raqqa. Perhaps they feel there's nowhere else to go and the game's up militarily over there.
Well, but the problem is, if you do reject these people back so there are people that generally want to join British society once again, right?
Maybe.
Yeah, so the problem would be that, okay, if they want to be reintegrated into society and you just blankly reject all of them, wouldn't that add to ISIS's rhetoric by saying that, look, there are these people that reject even their own kind, and wouldn't that in turn help recruit more people into ISIS?
I'm not sure. I think if you've made your decision and left the country and joined ISIS, I would have thought ISIS would take a very dim view of anyone returning, frankly. I mean, I would see the argument more on that side. Look, you may be right, Macias. There may have been people whose minds got twisted by, whether it's a hate preacher, it's something online, it could have happened in a prison. There may well be people whose minds were twisted and who genuinely have said, I've made the most awful mistake of my life. I want to go back to Britain and become a good person. But how can we afford to take the risk? Because it seems to me that if we were to have some appalling terrorist outrage in this country committed by one of these returning jihadi fighters, I think there would be real public anger. And that, I think, is the risk the government is taking. I mean, if something happened between now and the next general election, and it was seen that Theresa May and Amber Rudd had simply allowed these people back in who could have been stopped, who'd then gone on to do these things, it could have very big political consequences, couldn't it?
Yes, for sure. But then it's curious, why are they letting them back in the first place? If it would be potentially political suicide.
I don't get it. Now, it could be that these people have crept in through the back door, but that's not. When you look at what the government's saying about these things, they're basically saying that these people aren't posing a great risk, they were naive, they must be reintegrated, and that's what Max Hill QC has advised the government to do, whilst at the same time MI5 are warning us of plot after plot, and the Foreign Office and our Defence Secretary are all for wiping them out when they're in Syria. Matthias, we have a very, very inconsistent, wholly inconsistent policy. But you think there's hope, do you, that some of these people could be reintegrated?
Well, I do, because, imagine you are a very young person, and for some reason you're alienated from society. And all of a sudden you have this group that has very, very smart tactics, recruiting tactics. And for some reason or another, you end up going. A lot of people go for a desire for adventure. Other people go because they somehow, for some misguided reason, agree with the ideology. Mm-hmm. But once they get there, they see that it's not for them, and they do decide to come back. I don't think it's an absolute thing as well. I think there definitely should be attempts to reintegrate them. Okay,
Marius, I'm not going to wholly disagree with what you've said, because a policy of total exclusion will undoubtedly be unfair to some people. I just take the view that the risk of this is so great that if we are unfair to a few people, do you know what? Tough. Maria says, I don't care what's done with them, but they shouldn't be allowed back. The mentality that allows them to be influenced to want to join such extremism has no place in society. Sandra says, one jihadi in this country is one too many. Pete says, killed, yes, but only if proven, or locked up indefinitely. Difficult, Pete, in a battle zone environment. I'm not sure quite how many prisoners were being taken in this Battle of Raqqa. I suspect their numbers were very, very small indeed. Sam is calling me from Reading. Sam, good evening.
Hi, Nigel. Quick bit of background on myself. Left the army in 2013, spent 8 years, 3 tours in Afghanistan, 2 of which were with Special Forces, so I have a little bit of experience fighting against people of this type of ilk. Yep. Three important points to make. One, slightly off-piece. Brexit will be the best thing that ever happens to this country. I just wanted to sneak that in there.
Yeah. Move on. That's cheating. Go on.
I think it's really, really important to contextualise, and some of your other callers have already done this, what exactly these people have been up to. The systematic rape of tens of thousands of women and children, and in some cases these terrible stories of women and children bleeding to death. They've been raped so consistently. The murder of hundreds of thousands of people, taking the rights away from millions of people. And what I think makes this even worse is these are not illiterate farmers that we would have seen traditionally in Al-Qaeda and the sort of Taliban people that I've sort of come up against. These are not illiterate people who are being dictated to by the imam because they don't know any better. These are people who were brought up in an otherwise moral society. These are otherwise intelligent people. They made a conscious decision. They do not deserve to come back. They do not deserve a second chance. Is the right thing to do is to kill them, or as a minimum, stop them from coming back into this country. And importantly, my final point, it will act as a deterrent to future people thinking about going and fighting for these terrorist organisations.
Sam, as somebody that has fought, against this menace, against this evil, do you have a direct message for Amber Rudd, our Home Secretary? Because there may well be, as we speak, people returning from Raqqa.
I think it's a very, very simple one, and we have to think about the security of people in the United Kingdom. It may be a nice, politically correct message from the person who released this report today that says we must welcome them back with open arms, we must reintegrate them. You'll know some of the policies that the Swedes have been introducing about reintegrating ISIS terrorists back into society. We'll see whether that's successful or not. But the fundamental function of a nation state is to protect its citizens. And as you said in your introduction just before, if one of these people was to conduct any kind of atrocity, the like of which we've seen in Manchester, London Bridge, etc., then that would be a failure of the nation and of the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister to protect its people.
Terrific. Well, I very much hope, Amber Rudd, if you're not listening live now, I've no doubt you will see a clip of this tomorrow. Sam has been there. He's fought against this. He's seen the dreadful things that are being done. We do not want these people back in our country. Thank you, Sam. Another new call of the show. Great call. Very interesting. He's seen it at first hand. It's not pretty in any way at all. Ian says to me by Twitter, of course Rory Stewart is correct. In fact, most people do seem to agree. We have had callers saying, look, actually, some of them may have been conned into this. Maybe we should look at it on a case-by-case basis. But overwhelmingly, at the moment, you seem to be saying that actually the government have got this badly wrong. Seth is calling me from Dublin. Seth, good evening.
Hi, Nigel. Thanks for taking my call.
Not one bit.
Nigel, what I wanted to say was the biggest fear that your ministers have is actually going on a case-by-case basis. It's trying these people, because those trials will end in tears. Mm-hmm. The witnesses are dead, or the witnesses are afraid to come forward, or the witnesses are back in Iraq and Syria. So if you try these people, you're going to turn them into martyrs or heroes. That's why there are elements in your government who are saying, don't try them, let them back in, and at least they won't be martyrs or heroes to the public. It's very sad, but I think that's really what's driving your government.
Well, Seth,
they don't really mean it.
That analysis may well be right. But if that's the case, aren't they taking a massive risk with our safety and security in this country?
The question is, Nigel, not whether it's a massive risk, but what you could do about it. And the only thing you could do about it is get out from under the European courts, because once you can do that, then you don't have to worry about any sort of oversight, letting your judges making the right determinations.
Well, we have voted Brexit. I hope we're heading in the right direction. I mean,
we better do it soon.
We better do it very soon.
Coming home now.
Well, some encouragement there from Seth in Dublin. Amber Rudd, I know you're a Europhile, but actually, if you want to make Britain safer, be able to stop people coming back, get rid of bad uns, you need to be outside the power, the influence, the dominance of the European Court. Seth, thank you for that. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:30. Yes, the British government's policy is if you're a UK passport holder and you go to Syria to fight with ISIS, we are going to kill you with drone strikes. But if you want to come home, that's great. No problem at all. Just roam the streets, be free, because you probably went because you were just naive, and we'll reintegrate you in society. Something glaringly inconsistent and crackpot about this. And I have been of the view since 2015 that anyone that's gone, they really have made their decision, and they shouldn't be allowed back into the country, and yet this government allows them to. I don't get it. But before I return to that, Donald Tusk, the president of the European Council, there are lots of presidents in Europe, has said today that actually there are still three choices that Britain faces. We could have a good deal, or we could have no deal, or no Brexit. So Mr Tusk is saying, come on, you can all change your minds, you can come back to us, we'd prefer you to crawl on your hands and knees and beg us and say, please, please, can we stay? That, I think, is what he wants. And Sir Vince Cable, the leader of the Liberal Democrats, has said today that he thinks this is really a good news. If Brexit looks like a disaster, we should just call the whole thing off. And in ever friendly mood, Michel Barnier, the European Union's chief negotiator, has said that he thinks it will be several years before a Brexit trade deal was agreed. Well, that's positive, isn't it? And helpful and friendly, and just goes to show that when Mrs May stood up in Parliament yesterday and said progress had been made, she was talking nonsense. She's literally stuck, wading in treacle, we're going nowhere, and if a deal with the EU is going to take several years, I'd say forget it, because there's a great big world out there that would like to do deals with us. But back to this issue of returning jihadis, and morally, whether it's right for the British government using drones to target British passport holders fighting for ISIS in Syria. Hisham is my next caller. He's calling from Putney, and another new caller to the show. Hisham, good evening.
Hi, good evening to you, Nigel.
So what is your perspective?
Well, if the government wants them to welcome back to Britain, so let's go back a year ago and move 10 Downing Street to be in Mosul, and let them see what they done to the people, to the stones. Even the stones, they kill the stones. They kill everything. Those guys, they know one thing, that's to kill people and destroy every civilization being on ground. So if you welcome them back, I think me and my wife's wearing hijab, we will be really scared, not the British, not from the police. No, we are afraid from them, because they will reflect the bad picture of Islam.
Yes.
How can you allow a person who killed minimum 10 persons with cool blood, allowed him to come back? What he's gonna do? Is he gonna queue on Capinero for Colosso, or a queue on A40 for traffic? They don't know the law anymore. They are just they've been brutalised.
Hisham, are you from one of those countries originally that's been affected by this?
I'm from Iraq.
You're from Iraq, okay.
Right, yes.
Right, yeah. And when did you come to the UK?
I came in 2000.
Right, so before the Iraq War broke out. But you really make a point that, of course, and this gets forgotten very often, that there are more Muslims killed by jihadi terrorists than any other religion. And I think you're right. I think there are a lot of Muslims living in Britain today, I know some of them, who, abide the law and pay their taxes and want to integrate and be friendly with their neighbours and accept our way of life, who are deeply fearful that if this situation gets worse, their lives here are going to become less and less comfortable. Hisham, do you see any optimistic future with this?
Not at all. Nigel, I've been here for 17 years. Let's admit I was a bad person, and I wasn't ever in my life a bad person. But if I was a bad person before 2000, and then the 17 years I spent in UK, I became a better person, because I saw the law, how the enforcement of law, not by enforce, but by the smile of people, the way they behave, the way they help. So I've learned more. Those guys, most of them born in UK, yet he went there to kill. So the system doesn't help them, because their brain is shut. They can't do anything. They born this way. So
well, whether they're born this way or whether they're turned this way is a different thing. But Hisham, listen, fascinating call, and we wish you and your wife well. We really, really do. Mr. Farage, you've lost my vote. If Brexit means your death squads, I'm voting Remain next time, says Peter in Glasgow. It's not me advocating death squads. It's the government. It's the government that want to use drones to take out individual British citizens. And I've been asking people, morally, do they find that acceptable? My beef, Peter, is I just don't think we should let anybody who's gone with a British passport to fight for ISIS come back to this country. And I accept that will be, in some cases, unfair. But I think it would make us a safer country. As a member of the UN, we cannot leave someone without citizenship, no matter what we think, says Simon on Twitter. Yes, Simon, that argument was made to me in 2015. I think it was Ed Miliband that made that argument to me, that you can't take away from someone their statehood. My answer is you can. They've chosen their state. It's called Islamic State. That's how it seems to me. Haydar is calling from Chiswick. Good evening, Haydar.
Hi, good evening, Nigel. How are you?
I'm well. So what's your take on this?
So I'm also Iraqi, Nigel. I
Right.
came to the UK in 2005, and I'm from Mosul originally. I lived in Baghdad. So I'm just like so disappointed that we are discussing that these criminals could come back to the UK. I think they should be killed. I think they should, and even if they get in, they should be trialed. They should be put in prison indefinitely. They killed people there, Nigel. They destroyed homes, universities. They destroyed museums and culture and civilization. They killed children and women. They killed children as young as 5 and 4. They don't care about human beings. They raped women. They destroyed the Yazidi community. They just destroyed my country, my home, my people, and our future. And then they are allowed to come back. They're criminal. They killed people. How can they be allowed back to the UK and live a normal life? I don't understand that.
I don't get it. And yet, our Home Secretary for all those years, Theresa May, did diddly squat about it, and it would appear that Amber Rudd is about in the same league. I guess it's just cowardice. They're scared to stand up and do the right thing because they'll get criticised. There'll be European Union criticism. There'll be United Nations criticism. There'll be the European Court of Human Rights criticism. That's what they're scared of, Haydar. They want to be popular on the global stage rather, seems to me, than doing the right thing and actually protecting the country. Tell me, I mean, Mosul obviously has been, as you say, pretty much destroyed.
Destroyed, yeah.
But if...
Not only the city itself, the people, Nigel, the people have been destroyed by these criminals. Like, my aunt, one guy from Australia, he's an Australian guy, he came to their house and he just said, out, we need your house to use it to fight the Iraqi army. And they spent 45 days in a basement with 3 other families. And these Australian guys who joined ISIS, they just destroyed their house, looted everything, and they were ready to kill anyone who doesn't leave their house. It was just like, it's awful. It's really awful.
If that scourge of ISIS and extreme jihadism was removed from Iraq, would you then feel the country could be rebuilt and get back to what it was?
Yes. Hopefully, we have kicked their, out of the country, but hopefully we can rebuild our country. But in Iraq, if they are caught, they'll be trialed and they'll be executed, and that's the least we can do, to be executed. Or they can be killed by drone strikes. If I had the power, I will order drone strikes, and I don't care if they're women or children or adults. They're all criminals. All criminals, Nigel. They deserve to die.
Haydar, you've made an incredibly powerful, emotive point, and coming from Mosul, I'm in many ways not surprised, and I thank you very much indeed for your call. Aaron is calling from Chadwell. Aaron, what's your view?
Good evening, Nigel. I can't believe this. It's really upsetting me the stance our government is taking. It just shows such political weakness. Like, this is where is the accountability? If someone was to murder someone in this country, they would go to prison or, they'll be punished for it.
Yep.
But these guys are killing women and children, not because of they're fighting against them. These guys are killing women and children because they have a different view on life. And they're imposing their will on these people and killing them. And then they're welcomed back with accepting arms. It's not even not right. There's something morally wrong in just that.
We're being let down, aren't we? Very, very badly.
It's really upsetting. I work in a very Muslim area in Chadwell, and the majority of those people, even they're saying it just puts such a bad tarnish on the rest of the people, and it's just going to increase tension. I can't see any upshot.
Aaron, I think there are lots. I honestly, I think there are lots of big numbers of very decent Muslim people living in Britain who are getting more and more scared with every month that goes by because the actions of some from their religion are placing them all in a very bad light. Aaron, thank you very much indeed for that. Anne says on Facebook, the treason law needs to be put into effect. Well, Blair watered down our treason laws, and I agree with you. Time they were brought back. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, and it's 7:45. Gosh, I'm confused. Because on the one hand, the government says if you're a Brit and you're in Syria and you're fighting with ISIS, we're going to kill you. We're going to kill all of you. We're going to take you out with drone strikes or whatever means possible. But then the other bit of government says there's 450 of you nearly that have fought there that have come back, and we've only stopped one of you. And the rest of you are wandering around freely. There's something grossly inconsistent and crazy. And I really do think that the government have been desperately weak on this issue and have made this country a much less safe place, whilst they want to make Syria as safe as they possibly can. I don't get it. Maybe David in Guildford, who's a new caller to the show, can put me right. David, good evening.
No, you're right. I think we should kill him with the drone strikes, really. And actually, I think we should do it as to make an example. Because all these politicians are saying, oh, well, maybe we shouldn't, because they're trying to play a nice war. Well, no war is nice. All war is brutal, and you don't win a war by being nice.
That's certainly true. I mean, there are some questions here about rules of engagement. I mean, if it's a battle situation, clearly, you're fighting against these people. I mean, if they were, let's say, in a rest camp, would it be legitimate? Yeah. Would it be legitimate then? Would it morally be right then, David, to take them out with a drone strike?
No, of course not. But
right.
I wanted to make a point quickly about what this last caller, Matthias, I believe he was called.
Matthias, yeah.
About what is it? About them feeling alienated, about them feeling the need to go over and do awful acts of atrocities.
Yeah.
Because they feel alienated, and that's rubbish. We didn't alienate them. Britain didn't alienate them. Society didn't. They chose to alienate themselves, and I can prove this. I've lived in 6 months in Brazil. I could have come back recently.
Yeah.
And, when I was over there, I didn't know any of the language. So what did I do? Made an effort to learn basic level of language. I wasn't there long enough to be fluent. I embraced their culture. And saw all these wonderful things in Brazil. And actually, when I came back, I actually feel, my home's probably over there. People alienate themselves. Society doesn't do it. And these people who believe that it's our fault they're alienated are very silly.
Well, there are some, David, who would argue, even LBC presenters would argue, that there is an inherent racism in this country, which means that when different people have come here from different religions, that we've been nasty to them, and that's forced them to stay in their own social groups. I don't buy it. I suspect you don't either.
Well, that's the problem with ghettos. If people live in ghettos, they don't get out of their environment.
No, that's right.
They don't embrace how they get.
And that's why large-scale mass immigration is madness, because it's not possible if huge numbers come to integrate them in society. David, thank you very much indeed for your call. I go next to Nadeem, who's a new caller from Ilford. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you so much for taking the call.
So what's your view?
Yes, my view is that I totally support you. That's what I said to the lady as well, that if somebody can't be integrated in the first place, then how do you reintegrate that person?
Yes.
Once they've become criminals as
yes, that's a good point. So they're not integrated. They leave and fight for ISIS. They get brutalised. They get trained how to make bombs. Then they come back. Yes, the chances of them then being integrated are pretty limited, Nadeem, aren't they?
Yes, and they've committed some serious crimes which are even unthinkable. So really, in most countries, there's only one punishment for these crimes. So I don't know how those people can be let free in a society, and I think they just themselves chose what they wanted to do, and they should pay that price.
Do you think, Nadeem, that our political leaders are letting the country down on this?
I think that things are too soft on people who choose to go on the other side of the law. People who want to follow the law, who want to follow the norms, things are very difficult for them. But if somebody decides to do things otherwise, then there is no repercussion as such.
No. Nadeem, thank you very much indeed. Made your point very, very clearly. A call here for due process. Nigel, they should be sent to face trial in the countries they fought in. Once sentences served or freed, they can then apply to come back, and we can then decide what to do and release them if suitable. If in combat, standard rules of battle should apply. That's what Ben says. So there's several of you saying, actually, it's all well and good killing people in war situations, but we perhaps need to think about due process for people who are out of the line. Others, particularly two Iraqi callers, who've told us that actually these people have done such awful, monstrous things in Mosul and elsewhere that, frankly, to make the world a better place, they should be eliminated. Mohammed is calling me from Loughton. Mohammed, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel, to you. Nigel, back in 20 years ago, first when I applied for asylum at the airport, one of the questions they asked me, have you ever killed anyone? And the reason, if you said yes, then straight away they will send you back home, or they will send you to the safe country. I don't know how this country is doing a mistake that people, such a evil people like this, they want to integrate with those kind of civilized country. After eating, they will eat the heart of the people after killing them. They are not human. So you cannot just like put those people with this ISIS people with those kind of like a civilized Europe, you know. And I think Mr. Erdogan maybe who helps them to open at the airport of Istanbul. They say, where are you going, Kobani? The map of Kobani was already copied, how they can travel from Istanbul to Kobani and over there by the border. When the first ISIS attacked the Kobani, and after 4 days I was there by the border. I know how they closed the old villages opposite, and I was just watching the smoke is coming out from my city. I am originally from Kobani, and they switched the lights. You know, in the motorways you have a light, and the border of Syria and Turkey they have a light. Every time they want to pass a group of ISIS onto the other side, because the only the YPGs, there was only 100 people left in the middle between the border of the gate of the Turkey and the Kobani, and they tell them, okay, the Turkish government they will tell them, don't go from the west of the Kobani, go from the east side, where is the city of Tel Abyad. And
Mohammed, have you found?
I think it will be better not to allow those people. Even if you allow them, they have to be locked forever, because they will.
Well, why bother? Why bother having them back at all? Why bother? And Mohammed, you've been here 20 years. Was it the best decision you ever made?
The best decision, when I went back to my people in my city and I helped them, and financially, of course, and I closed my business, and also I think I'm very proud. And this is when I remind myself that time when Churchill, he's got a message. I read one of the book, I cannot remember, but with the Germany, it was the fight between Germany, and he asked the people, can you bring the coppers for us? And when everybody in England, they went and those coppers, they put it on the one of the scrubs yard, and they asked him, what do you want to do with it, Mr. Churchill? We don't know what to do with those kind of things. They say, okay, I just want to make sure that the people, when one day they will ask, okay, I did help my country as well.
Absolutely. No, those sentiments matter. Mohammed, fascinating phone call. I get on Twitter, even to a liberal like myself, it seems odd that ISIS recruits with anti-democratic views and anti-Western views are welcome back. Yeah, it is very, very odd. Khalid, you're my last caller of the evening. You're a new caller to the show. You haven't got long. You've got 45 seconds to make your point, and welcome.
Hi, Nigel.
Hi.
Just a quick question, just a quick statement. A lot of these people are under 25, and they say that, your brain doesn't develop until you're, over 25. A lot of these kids have been radicalized by imams or whatever. I myself am a Muslim. I've seen this type of stuff happen, right in front of me, But to say that, to brush everyone under the same, under the same scope, it is not fair. I think a lot of these kids don't even know what they were doing. But on the other hand, I also don't want them to come back here and start chaos.
I know. Khalid, listen, I'm sorry. Do call the show again. I know you're a first-time caller. We will have you again. Khalid making the point that in many cases these are youngsters. It may not have been their fault. And to have a sort of complete bar on anyone that's fought for ISIS coming back may be unfair to some individuals. And I accept that it may be unfair to some individuals. But I'd rather be unfair than do what our Home Secretaries, Amber Rudd, and before her Theresa May have done. They've only stopped one out of over 400 returning jihadis coming into this country. British government policy is to try and make Syria safer, but put Britain at greater danger. The whole thing is mad. I don't like it one little bit. You've been listening to The Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. I'm back tomorrow evening from 7. Coming up at 10 tonight, it's Ian Collins. But up next, it's Clive Bull.
Nigel, thank you.